dark clouds are rising.
Hey everyone, Sleepy Reader here. This is going to be kind of my portion of the little community project that Howler Mouse Tim has started. I'm just going to share with you my end of things as I understand things, and then later you can watch Tim's video. The basic idea, as I understand it, is that Tim has invited 8 of us to create a superhero and a supervillain. And we're not going to know what anyone else is doing or anything like that. I don't even know if it has to be a superhero and a supervillain, but a hero and a villain. Or a protagonist and an antagonist, I suppose. But anyway, none of us is going to know what anyone else is doing, and then we all send our work to Tim, and he'll put it all together and try to shape it into a shared universe. So it's kind of a creative experiment, and also kind of like a parlor game, sort of, like where you write sentences of a story on a piece of paper or something like that and pass it around. But a bit more complicated than your average parlor game. So a very creative, interesting idea from Tim. Maybe other people could try this, other small groups. He could only invite so many people or it would just get out of control, but there's tons of you guys out there who probably have great ideas for your own heroes and villains. In fact, I have not, spent much time in a really long time thinking about what superheroes I would create. I have, during large portions of my adult life, worked on creative writing short stories and attempting to write novels, but have not really turned my attention to comic books before. So it'll be interesting. Well, not interesting, but that's just my caveat. This is just my. It's not like I had a backlog of superhero ideas to throw out there. But maybe I do feel like I started from the writing end first, the ideas of characters and a setting, and then I had to do the drawings. Tim wanted us to do 2 drawings each, and obviously most of us are not artists or not very good artists. Some of us may be very good artists. So I had to kind of doodle. I did doodles, and then I thought I could, from those doodles, do a slightly better drawing that maybe had some kind of, that captured the right mood of the story that I wanted to tell, but that is way harder than I thought. We can constantly underestimate how hard it is to be a good comic book artist, I think. The amount of stuff they have to do. So all that happened was I went from small doodles to big doodles for my final pictures. But I will show you the pictures and tell you what this is all about, what my idea is about. First, I guess I should say, to me, the setting's important. My characters live in a place that I've called Macadam City. The other really hard thing I find is naming things. It feels like all the good names are taken, Gotham would be a great name for a city, or Sin City, the excellent name for a city. Then you got things like Central City and stuff. Yeah. Anyway, Macadam City is kind of, in my mind, like a cross between maybe Detroit and Manhattan or something like that. A once very big metropolis, but a lot of it was based on industry. But now it's kind of crumbling and has not been maintained very well, not taken care of. It's a city that people don't care about very much. It had a glorious past, but no one really cares much about it now, including the people who live there and the people involved in kind of running the city. The political and social structure there is very kind of corrupt, and there's just a lack of of caring very much. And so in this city, I made up two heroes. That's how it came to me. In this city, we have a brother and sister who have been living with their mother in a less desirable neighborhood in an apartment, and their mother has been mentally ill, and they've as my story opens, they have finally had to what's the word? I have no excuse. It's the middle of the day. It's not late at night. My brain should be working. They've had her committed to a mental institution, and they've had kind of limited lives and maybe limited emotional lives in a way because of dealing with their mother, and maybe so that it's Terry and Dorothy. Well, Dorothy's called Dora. And Terry, the boy, is about 17, and Dora is about 19. And Terry in particular may have mental problems also. Anyway, they've put their mother in a mental institution, and they're down in the basement storage area of their apartment and looking through her things and trying to see what she might need, and generally trying to assess the situation of what's left behind of their mother. And they find, just tucked away in the corner of the basement, an old chest. And it's more interesting to look in that than sort through all their mother's stuff. And they open it up, and it's full of superhero costumes. And what they don't know is it actually is it's just an old chest from a failed play. Someone did a musical play about superheroes maybe 20 or 30 years prior to the events of this story. But they don't know that. They take the chest up to their apartment, and they play around with it and trying on different costumes, and that's kind of fun. And Terry finds that this one costume fits him perfectly, and it makes him just feel really full of action, and like he's on the go. He can really do stuff. And it sort of, at first kind of a lark, but he starts taking it more and more seriously, the idea that with this outfit on, he could be a superhero. And he feels it makes him smarter and stronger and quicker. And so he does start going out into the night, and he calls himself the Spike. And he goes out at first just kind of scaring away and breaking up little gambling dens and drug dealers. Not getting anyone arrested or anything like that, but just sort of driving them away, hassling them, striking fast and then leaving in the dark. And his sister, Dora, finds out about this, and instead of trying to stop him, she joins him. She dons another costume and kind of follows him around and tries to make sure he's okay. And helps him out in a scrape, but kind of stays out of the way so that he maybe thinks he's doing more himself than he really is. And as time goes on, she'll kind of keep adding on to her armor to protect, not her armor, her costume, although eventually it will become like armor. Bringing more gear and fixing up her costume, whereas his costume stays the same because he thinks it's a magic costume that gives him power. And as they go on, they will dig deeper into the crime world and become better at fighting crime, and find kind of these levels of hidden dens of sin and such that they break up, and recurring gangs that they're fighting. So Terry calls himself the Spike. Dora calls herself Night Shimmer. But eventually, in a place that they raid, this kind of trove of unusual items that they discover kind of in a chamber under a building where they've broken up a gambling den or maybe a prostitution ring. Anyway, they find this trove in kind of a sub basement. And one of the things there is some very sophisticated sort of modern armor, and Dora finds she can adjust it to her body, and so then she eventually calls herself the Silent Saint. Anyway, and then later she's going to be called the Iron Maiden. Not the Iron Maiden, the Armored Maiden. Iron Maiden's taken. So this is my kind of woefully sad doodle of them. I once could draw pretty well, but I've spent so many years doodling that seems to be the only style I can do. So you can see maybe this is a little along the way of Dora having made her costume have a little bit of armor on it, and she carries some gear on her belt and stuff. And you can see the spike. I kind of maybe went too far trying to make it look like not a real superhero's costume, but one that doesn't fit that well. It should fit him pretty well, but it should be clear it's a costume and not made out of anything special. And it in fact doesn't totally fit. There's a gap where you can see his skin between the hood, the cowl, and the rest of the costume. But he does get to be a better and better fighter and develop more and more strategies for terrorizing and driving away criminals. So yeah, there's not a whole lot to see here. I would have, given a lot of time, I probably would have designed different outfits. I'm given many, many weeks, I might have improved my drawing style to get a sort of moodier, shadowier kind of art style, Francavilla, Gene Colan kind of thing would be nice. Or even a little touch of Frank Miller's Sin City. Eating some homemade brownie. Thank you to my wife. So, what we've seen so far is less than half the story of what's really going on in Macadam City, because to really know what's going on in Macadam City, you'd have to know all about the Golden Shark. Maybe that's a lame supervillain name or villain name. The Golden Shark, and here's my drawing of him. He just wears a suit. I would like him to have a kind of unusual, powerful presence, but that's the best I could do there. For lack of any other idea, I gave him this kind of weird magic going on in his eye. The Golden Shark is known to the law enforcement world and the rest of anybody who's kind of looks into crime. He's known as a loan shark. And he's happy to let people think he's kind of this petty criminal. But in fact, he is the power behind all organized crime in Macadam City. And he specializes in crimes that are kind of particularly corruptive to the human soul. So, along with loan sharking, he does the drug trade, of course, and the illegal flesh trade, from the more extreme strip clubs to prostitution rings to slavery, and protection rackets and gambling and extortion and anything else he can get his fingers into. But he's very behind the scenes. And what almost no one knows is that he is a magus. He is a magician, a wizard, a black arts master. And he's one of the few in the world. There's maybe 5 or 6 in the whole world. And they're all vying with each other for greater power. And Macadam City for him is kind of a battery of human suffering that he draws upon. And throughout the city, he has kind of a network of underground kind of stashes and nodes of power. And in fact, they form some kind of mystic shape, and there's tunnels leading between them. And so there's a whole kind of underground network, unbeknownst to most people. And probably the people who work for him may know about 1 or 2, but only he knows about all of it. And those include the chamber that the Spike and Night Shimmer found that they took the armor that Night Shimmer used to change into the Silent Saint. And the thing is that each of the Maguses around the world control a city, and they're all vying for more power. It's kind of like a sinister, awful game that they're playing with each other for power. And the Golden Shark is so wrapped up in that, he doesn't see anything else. He has tunnel vision. It's all about this magical power game that he's involved in. And so he slowly becomes aware of our heroes, the Spike and Night Shimmer. And slowly they have more and more encounters with him. Usually indirect, but eventually more direct encounters. So eventually Night Shimmer becomes the Silent Saint. The armor she takes from the Golden Shark, unbeknownst to her, eventually she can't even remove it. And she talks less and less, but has more and more power. There's real power, both technological and magic, in that armor. And as it fuses to her, she becomes more and more cruel and amoral, and eventually is a supervillain in her own right. So we're left as our only superhero is the Spike with his questionable sanity, but perhaps his growing skill in fighting crime. So his sister now calls herself the Armored Maiden, and she feeds on the suffering of McAdam City also. So that's where I've kind of left it in my mind. That's my setup. We'll see if that can be meshed into a universe with other heroes that people have made up. And I'd be happy to have other heroes show up in McAdam City and fight with henchmen or the Golden Shark himself, and fight with Night Shimmer when she becomes the villain, when she becomes the Armored Maiden. I definitely can see these things expanding out of this city, particularly my idea of, kind of a small network of cities. There's each controlled by a wizard, and that escalating battle would come in to affect the plots too. So in my mind, I kind of see this as a cross between Sin City a little bit and a Doctor Strange kind of thing. At the moment, the only people with magical power I have are evil. Along with it, interesting to realize how hard it is to draw. When you think in your mind, I can draw pretty well. Here I think I did the face pretty well, but then I tried to do a hand down here, and that was a mess. And even just figuring out how a suit works is really hard for me. But also another hard, as I spent enough time thinking about this, then you kind of think, well, what would you do if you actually were doing a comic book on this? And part of the problem is what makes this a little bit different from other comics, I think, is what we eventually learn about the villain and his magical activities and the way he's using the city and his conflict with other villainous maguses around the world. But the way I've imagined it, there would be many adventures before they start uncovering what's really going on in the city. And those adventures would easily become kind of cliche. We've seen it before, sort of superhero fighting at night, maybe a little nutty. It could accidentally end up being a little bit like, what's it called? I want to say Hit Girl, the series with Hit Girl, Kick-Ass, or something like that. People without powers out trying to fight crime. So you can see how the job of a real comic book writer is difficult. How to show the audience that you have these cool ideas, but not give the ideas away right away, and have something for the comic book to develop into. And if we look back at the history of comics, it's easier. Spider-Man or the Fantastic Four started off with some nice setup, but then more and more levels of richness could be revealed later. But now that we're in this more advanced level of comics where everyone's kind of used to the basic stories, and you have to indicate what's special about a comic book from the first issue. You can see it's really challenging to be a writer. It's I think we can all come up with basic ideas, but to shape them into stories that really grab people is still a hard task. Don't know if I could do it or not. With enough time and thought, one could probably do it. Anyway, so I'm really interested to see what everyone else's ideas are, and really interested to see how Howler Mouse puts it all together. It's a lot of fun. So I'll talk to all of you guys soon. Bye-bye.